My name is Staff Sergeant Powell, A21 CRS Security Forces. Thank you all for being here today, first and foremost. This day is intended to provide an opportunity for all of us to engage with each other in open dialogue to solicit candid feedback on ways we might identify and also intervene early to combat corrosive impacts of extremism within our ranks. This stand-down day should be viewed as just the start of a much longer conversation. It is our responsibility to forge an environment where all airmen can thrive free of discrimination, hate, and also harassment. Next slide. So just an intro real quick for our speakers. We're going to start with Senior Gallagher with some information about some recent extremist events. Next, we're going to dive right into the oath of enlistment and what that means to our chief, and then also from security forces. Followed by specific information from Special Agent Judd Syke from OSI, thank you for being here, sir, appreciate it, as well as Major Rogers from the 60th AMW Judge Advocate Office, sir, as well, thank you for being here as well. The flow of events is going to be, after our guest speakers brief, we will call up our facilitators that have already been identified and then break into small groups for a 30-minute discussion. We have 10 total facilitators, so we'll just we'll get a head count in just a minute and then just kind of break it up from there. After the small groups, these guided discussions will gather back up and finish with closing remarks from Lieutenant Colonel Lee, and then everyone will be dismissed to their respective flight leadership after that. Next slide. So to start off, why are we here? Why should we care about extremism? To start off, increased frequency. Last year alone, there were 16 extremist terrorist attack plots, which was an increase from 13 in the year prior in 2019. The dangers that we might face, for reference, the FBI's November 2020 release of hate crimes stats for 2019 notes 7,314 criminal acts with directed 51 murders. We are vulnerable, even if you don't think you are. Online forums, chat rooms, social media, and internet games are some common examples of ways these groups pull people into their societies. As military members, we have to be aware of what to look for in order to avoid these certain situations. With that being said, I'm going to hand it off to Senior Gallagher for him to brief you on what we mean exactly by extremism.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Senior Gallagher, and I'm going to kind of like start off that. I'm going to start off by, at its core, what we mean by extremism. Extremism is a set of ideologies or beliefs. Now, we all have our own belief system, but extremist ideologies or beliefs might be acts of discrimination or hatred, or aggression and destruction. We also get an oath when we enlisted to serve our country and to protect its citizens. When you act in an extremist way, you are, to the highest degree, undermining that oath of enlistment. Now, actual acts of aggression or discrimination are not the only ways we can be extremists. We can fundraise. We can spread awareness by handing out pamphlets, by rallying. We can train people. And it's not as simple as just acting in an extremist manner. So some real life examples. We're going to start by talking about the 2017 First Baptist Church tragedy. A few minutes after 11 a.m. on November 5th, 2017, former Airman Devin Kelly arrived at First Baptist Church and proceeded to shoot and kill 26 people and injure 22 more. This was the deadliest mass shooting in the history of Texas and the 5th deadliest in U.S. history. While investigation never showed racism or religious discrimination or prejudice to be the motivation, this shooting is a clear example of an extremist act. Next, we're going to kind of hit home base here. Former Airman Stephen Carrillo. Last year, in the aftermath of the George Floyd killing, former Travis Air Force Base Airman Stephen Carrillo used protests in Oakland as cover to kill 53-year-old security guard David Patrick Underwood and wound his partner as they guarded the Ronald B. Bellums Federal Building. Separately, on June 6th, Sergeant Damon Gutzwiller and 2 other officers responded to a 911 call about a suspicious white van that had both weapons and explosives. When they arrived, the van left, so they pursued it all the way to Carrillo's home, where he got out and ambushed the two officers, killing Sergeant Gutzweiler and injuring the two others. It was later revealed that he had ties to the far-right extremist Boogaloo movement, and this fact would tie directly into his motivations for these acts. And most recently, as we all know, on January 6, 2021, a group of people stormed the Capitol as a result of them not accepting the outcome of the election. Among them was retired Lieutenant Colonel Larry Rendell Brock Jr., who now faces immense legal troubles. Not only did he break into the Capitol building, but he was photographed wearing body armor and holding zip ties. It is speculated that he had plans to take hostages. Also, ex-security forces member Ashley Babbitt was shot and killed as she attempted to climb through a broken window into the Capitol building's speaker's lobby. Many of these rioters, including Ashley Babbitt, were members of the far right-wing extremist conspiracy group known as QAnon. As you can clearly see, extremism is a rising problem in our country and in our Air Force. We, as members of the Air Force, are not immune to anti-American, violent, or extremist behaviors of people. It's important that we pay attention to today's training, and I want to try to take something away from it. Next, I'm going to introduce A1C Ritson to speak about the oath of enlistment and what it means to him, and followed by A1C Ritson, our very own chief, is going to come up and give us a brief report.
Hello, good morning everyone. I'm A1C Ritson, and today I'll be talking about the oath of enlistment and what that means to me, and a little bit about why I decided to join the Air Force. Now, when you think of the word oath, I want everybody just to take a few moments and think about that word oath, and think of some other words that are relatable or similar to that word oath. Just take a few moments to yourself and think. Now, as we do that, some of the words I think of are promise, dedication, commitment, vows, sacrifice, all words of honor. And these are all words that we use every single day. I would like to give an example of how we make an oath to ourselves on a regular basis, and we don't even realize it. Now, being in the military and being in the Air Force, we all know PT is a top priority for all of us here. So, I think it's fair to say we all been in a position where we look in the mirror and we say to ourselves, let's go, it's game time. I'm gonna make a change today. I'm gonna start going to the gym. I'm gonna start working on my physical fitness. Today's the day that I'm gonna make that positive change for myself. So right in that moment, you made an oath to yourself. And why do we make oaths like this? Because we know making an oath is going to have a better outlook and a better outcome for our life. It's far more rewarding to stick to an oath than to break that oath. Now, are the consequences as severe as not living up to the oath of enlistment if you don't keep that oath compared to keeping the oath of going to the gym? I don't think so, but if you don't have right physical fitness, you may fail that PT test. And if you don't live up to the oath of enlistment, then you're gonna have to deal with the UCMJ, and who wants to do that? So we know that oath that we all took. We raised our right hand. We repeated the words that were said to us. We said we were going to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. We were going to obey the orders of the officers appointed over us. And follow the regulations of the UCMJ. And just to touch back on what I said earlier, why do we make these oaths? The reason we make these oaths is because they're going to better our life in some way. Now, just to share a little bit about myself, I'm 8 months into my military career, and I want to talk about a little bit why I joined and what motivated me to take that oath of enlistment. About 5 years ago, I became a father. And for those of us who have children, we know it's one of the most difficult things. I was a first-time dad, and my son was diagnosed with autism. And on top of that, I was a single dad as well. So taking on that challenge, being a single father for 4 years of my life, as much as I thought that I could do it on my own, I knew I needed help and a strong support system. So that led to me taking another oath before I joined the Air Force. I knew that having a team that support me would be more powerful than me doing it by myself. So I decided to make an oath to my wife and take some vows. With love and support on my mind and heart, I knew that would better my life and allow me to accomplish my goals and have a better life for my son. So I took that oath. And now that I had the family life established, I still knew that I needed more help to support my family. So I took another oath. I walked in the recruiting station and I said, let's go. Today's the day. I'm ready to sign up for the United States military, the world's greatest Air Force. I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to be part of a team that I knew would support me and my family and my goals. And just to share something else about myself, why I wanted to be part of a team, I played college basketball for 4 years prior to joining, before I became a father. And I knew that was going to come to an end. You could only play sports in high school and college for so many years. I missed that. I missed putting on a uniform, being part of a team, being part of a legacy, having pride, and wearing something on your chest, having your name on your uniform. So I wanted to continue that. And of course, going into it, I knew about all the tangible rewards I would gain from joining the United States military, such as a steady income, traveling, buying that car you always wanted, having a house on base or off base, getting help with things of that nature, wearing cool gear, shooting cool guns, flying airplanes, working on jets. All of those things I knew would come with this experience. But what I learned as time went on, through BMT, tech school, and being here at my first duty station, the legacy and honor that you get from being part of this is far greater than any of the tangible rewards. These are things that you can't see or touch, but you know they're real and other people see them in you. When you walk into that gas station and somebody randomly walks up to you and says, "Thank you for your service." We all been there before, we know how that makes you feel. When that picture of you is hanging in your grandmother's house or your mother's house of you in BMT with your blues on, and that's going to be there for life. Your children, your grandchildren are going to see that picture. They're going to see your uniform hanging up in the closet. That's the legacy. That's the honor that we get from joining the world's greatest Air Force. And I know some of us are in civilians, some of us are in OCPs right now. But even on our day off, when we're off duty, we still live up to that oath. Just a quick analogy I would like to relate to that is superheroes. Just a quick, I think of Batman and Superman. Everybody knows Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne. The same person. When they're not in hero mode, they're still that same superhero. When danger gets called, they respond to action. We do that in real life. I believe that. We all walk around different when we're not in uniform and we don't even realize it. And just to wrap things up, I decided to be a defender when I joined. I chose that because I wanted to not only defend this country, but defend my family. I knew with the son having autism that I would face challenges for the rest of his life and my life. So I wanted to learn self-defense. I wanted to learn how to protect him and my family and any challenges or obstacles we may overcome. And I believe we all may not wear SF on our sleeve, but we're all defenders of this country. And in conclusion, I would like to say, let's focus on the legacy of the oath and the history behind it. And let's take this oath with honor. Let's not focus on what the oath can do for us, but what we can do to live up to the oath. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy Ritson. Next up, Chief Counsel for here, sir.
Can y'all hear me? No. Good? Yes? No? No? Turn the damn volume up.
Thanks, old man.
I hate microphones. How about now? You got me now? Alright. Tough act to follow. Holy crap, dude. That's a good story. That's awesome. That's amazing. For me, I'll be brief. I know I talk a lot, so I'll be brief. So my family, both sides, both immigrated to this country. My dad came from Chile as a young man. He was a bad kid growing up. So mom and dad booted him off to Florida to go to military school, and that's how my dad got here. My mom, she was, as a baby, grandma and grandpa were fleeing Belgium when those crazy Nazis were running around over there. So that's how my mom got here. So me and my sister were the first actual born in the U.S. So when my household, my family growing up, being part of the U.S., being part of this country has always been something very prideful and very dear to our hearts. My dad was always raising the flag and praising the country. Just loved it. So it was a no-brainer when it came time for me to figure out what to do with my life, and I decided to join the military. Did not know I was going to be in damn near 30 years. I'll be 30 years in 2 years tonight. Just hit 27 years last week. Crazy. I thought I was going to do 4 years and out, and that was it. But no, I've done this oath multiple times. Done it every time I've sewed on, and done it every 4 years up until, what was it, 2 years ago, it came out that indefinite enlistment deal. So I signed up for that, because you know what, I'm in it to win, I'm in it to the end, so they had to kick me out. So that's what I did. So to me, I kind of broke down what the words of the oath and what they mean to me. First off, solemnly or I state your name, you know how it goes. Support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That doesn't mean always just going down range and shooting bad guys. That means all the crap that we deal with here in this country, all the right extremism that we have going on. Anything that's attacking what I believe is our country and our way of life, I'm going to defend that. And that's what the oath means to me at that part. And then I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. It means be faithful to it. Don't waver back and forth. Support your country, defend your country, do your thing. Don't get pulled one way or the other. Do what's right for the country. Obey all the orders of the officer or the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed above you. Now with that one, notice it says obey. It doesn't say agree with. It doesn't say argue with. It doesn't say go this way or that way with. It says obey. Which it don't matter if it's something I don't agree with, I'm doing it. I obey with what the officers above me say, what the President says. So that's a tough one sometimes. Some people get in Facebook land and start bad-mouthing the President, bad-mouthing Congress, bad-mouthing this. There's an actual article, I think you guys are going to bring it up, UCMJ, Article 88. You can't do that. You can talk crap about policy all day long, but as soon as you blast someone's name out there, you can be held liable against UCMJ. And that's something you don't want to go down that road. So I've had a church up come my friends and say, hey man, you want to tone down a little bit. I get it. I feel that way too, but you can't blast it out there. We in uniform cannot talk crap about our leaders. And then, what's the other? How's the rest of the other? What's the last thing you said? Help me out. What's the last line? So for me, it's just basically just I did forget, honestly. I freaking drank part up here. I don't have my coffee yet. Someone help me out with the last line.
According to regulations, the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
I kind of already alluded to that, so yeah. Obey the people, follow the UCMJ, defend the country, defend what's right, speak for what's right. Us being in uniform, we do kind of hold our health to a higher standard. People look at us to support the right right thing. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but support what's right for the country. So for me, like I said, I wasn't planning on doing 30 years, but here I am, and I've loved every single minute of it. I've taken this oath freely every single time I've taken it. I've loved it, enjoyed it. I really care about this country. You guys would probably do. We wouldn't be here if you didn't. So, like I said, I'll keep it short. That's all I got.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief Ritson. You guys did a great job. I think it's fair to say we're all pumped up for today's training now. With that said, please welcome Sintar, Special Agent Site to tell us how to break down the cold hard facts for us.
It's good enough? Yeah. You got a good slide. So basically we're going to break down what domestic violence extremism is in a couple of different groups. Some indicators of extremist behaviors, activities, and business. Devices of extremists, vulnerability to joint. What these groups are looking for, who they're looking for. Common types of groups within our area, and farther out in North California. And what you should do and how to report this. So domestic violence extremism, they say use described an individual based on operating primarily within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States. Advocacy of ideological positions and use of strong rhetoric can be lawful under the First Amendment. Rights to take additional action for threats of violence to the Constitution. So basically, the advocacy and speaking out against belief is fine, but it'll take that additional action to constitute crime. But as she said, as members of the military, we're all held to higher standards. Slide. All right, three primary subgroups of domestic violence extremists. First one is racially, ethnically motivated extremism. Threats involving potential unlawful use or threat of force, violence, furtherance political or social agenda, deemed derived from bias or unrelated to race or ethnicity, based on the common symbols that are used. We'll go into that more in depth a little bit. Slide. Next, we got the militia violence extremists. These are like cowboys, preacher centers, golden boys, all that kind of stuff. Right-wing extremists, commonly described as anti-government extremists, and are usually organized as paramilitary force or whatever they want to call themselves. Flying on school here, mostly ordering from China, which is kind of like some of these mobilize to protect a perceived threat to individual gun ownership rights. Modern militias are organized as paramilitaries, conduct weapons training, and other field exercises that have sometimes included the former U.S. military. So these are guys that are heavily focused on the military aspect of who they're recruiting. All right, next slide. Next is involuntary celibate, violent extremists. They call themselves the incel. Shorthand for involuntary celibate. Violent political ideology based on new waves of misogyny and white supremacy. Mostly young men. Frustrated because they can't get girls for whatever reason, so they latch on to this kind of thing. A lot of it's meme based. Victims of depression, feminism, ideology, which must go from lawful violence. These guys don't really act too much, but I mean, they're more, like I said, internet type, meme type, whatever they want. Next slide. These are other classified groups. Those were the three main that we're concerned about. You got anti-government, anti-authority, violent extremism, animal rights, environmental, violent extremism, abortion-related. A lot of these are subgroups of subgroups. Next slide. So some of these are the behaviors that you're going to see. of these extremists, whether they're within the military, not in the military, out in life, whatever you're doing. These are the type of things you're going to see. Preparing, disseminating, martyrdom, video, statement, last will, a lot of stuff again is derived from the internet. You're seeking religious or political justification for a planned violent act, attempting to mobilize others to violence, especially family members and peers. Seeking help from family peers, or authority figures to enable travel to one terrorist group overseas. Preparing to travel to fight with or support terrorist groups, communicating intent to engage in violent extremist activity. Again, on social media, tweets, hashtags, all this kind of stuff. Next slide. Some activities, violence, some threats of violence, array of weapons, just like Grillo, you have array of weapons in his house, violent rhetoric on digital platforms, propaganda through social media, and groupthink. When it comes to groupthink, a lot of this is that mob mentality. So you take this person out of that mob mentality, and they're a whole different person. Next slide. These are the type of attributes that make someone vulnerable to join these types of things. Limited family support, limited identification with community groups, social isolation to your financial and social barriers. Also, seeking adventure, independence, belonging. These types of people can latch on to these groups. And this is big in the military too, because when you're not here, you have to manage family support. A lot of people have limited identification. They have to really are and want to join. Next slide. So these are some things, some groups we have in our area and further out in Northern California. So the first one, is quick. So they're called the BASE, Neo-Nazi White Supremacist Acceleration of Paramilitary Hate Group. Government Training Network, formed in 2018 in the US and in Australia. So they're all over Europe. The group advocates the formation of white states. The goal is to see achievable via terrorism and violent overthrow of existing governments. We get the race war preppers. They do hate camps. And then Canada designated them as a terrorist group in February of this year. So I guess Canada's hopping forward too. Next slide. So it's actually both assembly. They're based out of Northern California as well. Basically, religion which involves worship of ancient German spirits gods. So this goes back to 1994. Racist doctrine based on ethnicity. Approach calls folkish. Headquarters, like I said, in Northern California. Chapters all over the world. Next slide. By the way, down below is kind of the symbol that these groups use. So, if you see this, again, a lot of these are derived from just regular symbols that they latch on to, take, and run with. And that's why you're seeing a lot of people, especially in the military, get in trouble with, having these types of things maybe on their car, stickers, especially like 3%er. We're not thought police, but at the same time, we gotta ask people, do you know what this sticker means? Do you know what this is for? A lot of people, I don't know what this is. It looks cool. I like guns, and that's why I put it on. This one's the Ottawa Home Division, also known as the National Socialist Order, another Nazi terrorist network, formed in 2015. Based out of the South, in the United States. They're all over the United Kingdom, Canada, Germany, all over Europe. Next slide. We have Patriot Front. Again, this is another group that takes from basically being patriotic, and they latch on to this and it's how they draw people. Patriot Front is American white supremacist, neo-fascist, American nationalist group, which utilizes imagery, capability, and other white American values, ideology. Next slide. So this is a big one, 3%ers, big in the military. This is the anti-government militia movement. A lot of people don't know that. They don't really know what it stands for. stick around, or at least some seem to stick around. Again, a lot of these are ideologies, but they can turn around pretty quick. Legal movement. This is another big one that's starting to kind of take over. They're loosely organized, right? Anti-government extremist political movement in the United States, many of whom being condemned for being terrorists. As you know, out in Seattle, Oakland, St. Cruz, Smithville, movement consists of pro-gun, anti-government groups. Specific ideology of each group varies, and obviously racism differ widely. So a lot of these guys are more of the ideological type, and then you have the others that are more radicalized. Ties to anti-white supremacists, neo-Nazi groups, just looking for that race war start, as it's looking about it. There are also groups that condemn racism, white supremacy, June 2020. This goes back to Stevensville. Again, these are the types of people that, within that mob mentality, everyone feels comfortable, but you single them out. You take them out of that mentality, they'll break down. Next. So this is a new one, Cowboys, male-only organization, why promotes and engages in political violence in the United States, Canada, faction areas, English focus on white supremacists. Alt-right, just another alt-right group. They're trying to make a name for themselves. Next slide. Everyone knows about it. How they operate, what they do. Basically, this is another group that latches on to any type of political unrest, any type of peaceful protest. People will send in different types of people to start any type of unrest they can. If you have a peaceful march, they'll start breaking windows, then they'll disappear. So these are the type of people that really like to latch on to these peaceful protests. Next slide. So this is our current threat. It's a lot. I'm going to read this to you. The vast majority of DBs in this area not pose a direct threat to military members of the past Air Force Base. Intelligence analysts suggest the groups continue to split up to recruit, yet the manner of recruit occurs primarily via online platforms, social media. Although these groups generally pose no threat, their activism centers around public displays, sometimes targeted at government officials. The concern lies not so much with the DB groups exercising their First Amendment rights, but instead with individuals who may advocate and act with violence during First Amendment and politically constitutional acts. Additionally, fringe politics and hate conspiracy theories, including QAnon, which foremost an online trolling and misinformation movement, very likely motivate some domestic extremists to engage in criminal or violent acts. QAnon it's not really a group, it's like throw out disinformation and kind of stir up the fire. See the past year in our area, QAnon adherents are becoming less than fringe conspiracy theorists, and more of an ideology that has hijacked protests, encouraged followers of damage and they symbolize local state that government companies and attack law enforcement. Next slide. So this is what you should do and how you should report. A lot of it's common sense. If you observe an individual group that appears to hold any type of these ideologies that are active duty military members or associated or located on Travis, or even outside of Travis, notify the ECC in as much identifying information as possible, what you know about them, what you see, what you're doing. And again, you can run this up your chain of command as well. Take it to your supervisor, and they'll know the appropriate action from there. Right? Yeah, that's it. You guys got any questions? Oh God, yeah.
So,
Someone say nothing.
you started off with, hey, here's some of the, I don't know, the vulnerabilities, people who seek adventure and lonely, et cetera, and then you have, here's the extremism actions like posting, I want to shoot somebody in the face. What can we look at the road to extremism so we can catch it early enough where we can make a peer-to-peer or leadership to subordinate discussion happen prior to the whole law enforcement, you've now crossed the red line, you're illegal now versus you're trending that way? What signs do you see at the beginning of the extremism process that can help us make that?
A lot of this is yes, still here. I don't know if I've been talking right now. A lot of this starts out with that ideology of basically isolation. So if you see someone who was kind of out, you know, has a good group of friends, kind of starts to shy away, starts maybe missing a bit work, starts posting. Social media is the biggest one. I mean, that's the easiest way you can kind of sniff this out is social media posts, whether it's memes. A lot of people start with memes, thinking like things are jokes. People don't take it seriously, and then next thing you got is the incels up here. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, this can be verbally displayed, but until an action occurs, like I said, it's not really a crime. Now, legal's going to have a better standpoint on this about with, what we as military members are charged with doing. Again, not speaking out against the president and all this kind of stuff. So we're held to a tighter standard. But yeah, it's just acknowledging it, knowing that it's there. Like I said, a lot of this is ideology until an action occurs that it turns radical, which is what we're seeing in moving forward, especially with like January 6th. What happened at the Capitol. So I don't know if that answered your question or not. Anything else?
All right, thank you again for you all coming, appreciate it. Next up, we have Major Rogers from the legal office.
Good morning, everyone. Sir, I will, I think, get your question in my favor as to when we're kind of seeing some of those behaviors. If I don't, remind me at the end, but we will touch on kind of command options for maybe those early stages where we can get to a corrective, right? Get the member back on track. And really, my goal for today for you guys is to give you kind of an overview of what the rules are, right? What are the rules with this stuff? When are we kind of in the green, yellow, and red zones? That's really my broad goal with the presentation today, so hopefully we'll accomplish that. You can let me know if you have any questions. Just go ahead and jump right in. All right, so what's that document up there on the left? Constitution, right? Preamble to the Constitution of the United States. So I was stationed in D.C. at Andrews. Previously had a chance to go see it in the National Archives, which is pretty cool, right? Those documents that this country was founded on still exist today. Eventually, and they may have already, they're taking them off display at some point, right? Because they're deteriorating, even just from any light. But the fact that this country is still in existence all these years later, based on these kind of founding documents that we're all taking that oath to, right? That we heard about earlier, the Raymond C. Ritson chief. It's pretty cool, right? So we've got the Constitution there, we've got the airmen taking the oath. Just real quick on the oath as well for the next slide. You see that commonality, right, from the enlisted officer and National Guard, even oath to swear that we're going to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, right, against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So we talked about that earlier, so we'll move on, but just a reminder, right, what we're taking that oath to defend. Next slide. All right, so here's kind of a good overview of DoD policy, right? This is straight out of the DoD instruction, and one of my takeaways for you guys as well. While there's a kind of renewed emphasis on extremism right now in light of some recent events, right? The rules really aren't new. The DoD instructions, the Air Force instructions, the UCMJ, all of this has been around prior to January 6th, right? Prior to the recent events. So that's all the same. And here's the key as to what the rules are trying to do. So, DoD policy that service members' rights of expression should be preserved to the maximum extent possible, right? Because the question is always, hey, what are my First Amendment rights in light of the fact that I'm wearing the uniform as a service member, right? So preserve to the maximum extent possible, but there is a but, right? That's coming. In accordance with constitutional and statutory provisions, okay? And consistent with good order and discipline and national security, right? This same DoD instruction has some directives to the commander as well, right? No commander should be indifferent to conduct that, if allowed to proceed unchecked, would destroy the effectiveness of his or her unit. So the commander has obligations, right, to maintain good order and discipline within the unit as well. And that's what they're going to be doing in consultation with the legal office as they start to see maybe some behaviors that concern them, right? So again, that's the overarching policy that I want you to think about as we kind of proceed through the briefing, all right? Balancing, right? It's that balance between your rights as an American on one hand, and then obligations you have when you take that oath, when you put on the uniform, and then think about it from the commander's perspective as well, and the obligation the commander has to maintain good order and discipline within the unit. All right, next slide. Little trivia, okay? A little trivia time from the legal office. So, talking about the Constitution today, so how many articles are in the Constitution of the United States? Everybody know how many articles are in the Constitution? Wild guess. No idea. 34? I see 8. I see 8. That's close. So 7 articles. 7 articles in the Constitution. I didn't know that before getting this slide presentation together. We talk about Article 3 judges in the legal context a lot, but we didn't know that. How about amendments? This one I feel like we sometimes know. How many amendments in the Constitution? 27 currently. 27 amendments in the United States Constitution. And then of those amendments, do you guys know how many constitute the Bill of Rights? How many amendments make up the Bill of Rights? 10, I see it up there, good. So the first 10 amendments, right, that's what we refer to as the Bill of Rights, so the first 10 amendments in the Constitution. Anyone want to take a wag on how many words are in the United States Constitution? How many words? A lot of mumbling, right? 4,400 approximately, 4,400 words in the United States Constitution. Oldest person to sign it. This is I'll give you a hint, I guess. It's like it would be a commonly known founder, right? There it is, Ben Franklin. Any guess on the age? Okay. Well done. That was impressive. Ben Franklin was 81 years old. Were you here for the last 3? Okay. That's really good. He was 81 at the time of signing the Constitution. Very good. And then, anyone know the proposed official name of address for the president? It's fairly lengthy. I'm guessing maybe not. Kind of interest. So it was His Highness, the President of the United States of America, and protector of their liberties. So, a little bit cooler than voting. Right? All right, enough for the on to the rest of the presentation. Here's an overview of what we're going to talk about, right? So we're going to break it up into kind of 2 main categories, if you will. The first one will be just what are more or less common political activities, right? That are both permissible and impermissible. Again, try and give you an idea of what's good to go, what's not good to go as an airman. And then part 2, where we're kind of crossing that barrier from permissible mainstream political party stuff into what OSI was briefing on potentially, right? Potential involvement with some of those impermissible organizations, extremists, dissident, etc. So hopefully give you an idea of what to look for, what those rules are, what to keep an eye out for as we're looking out for each other. Next slide. All right, so once again, kind of those rules, right? So members of the armed forces are encouraged to exercise rights and responsibilities of citizenship, but are subject to certain restrictions on their political activities. Again, part of putting on the uniform, taking the oath, right? You're voluntarily giving up, curtailing a little bit, maybe the rights that you would have were you not in uniform, right? So wearing a I voted sticker, right? Participating in our democracy, absolutely good to go. But as you see a picture from the January 6th Capitol riots, trespassing, stopping a joint session of Congress, right? Gonna be good to go as a uniformed member of the United States Armed Services? Definitely not. We'll talk about political rallies, right? Arguably, maybe earlier that day, it was a standard political rally that turned into a riot. So we'll talk about what you can do regarding political rallies, right? That aren't violent, that aren't trespassing on government property. We'll get into those rules as well. Next slide. All right, so here's some things that are clearly good to go, right? Militaries may, of course, register to vote, can express a personal opinion on political candidates and issues, can encourage other members to vote, right? Make monetary contributions to political candidates or organizations, right? You're allowed to do that in your personal capacity. The real key here with all of these things is that there can't be any sort of implied DOD endorsement, right? So, next slide, please. So military members may also join a political club, right? You can join the Solano County Republican or Democrat club. You can attend partisan and nonpartisan political fundraising activities or conventions. You can attend rallies and debates as well. And again, the key distinction there is not in uniform. And then even if you aren't in uniform, we see the picture on the right of a staff sergeant charged with assault at a Trump rally, right? If you're identified as engaging in that kind of behavior at a political rally, still potentially going to face some consequences, because now we know by this news article, right, this person's been identified as a service member. That being said, you don't lose your right to self-defense wherever you go, right? You don't lose your right to self-defense in any context. But if you're engaging actively, and I don't think that was the case with this particular case, where he made a decision to kind of go after this guy, right? So, not going to be good to go. And again, not uniform. So on January 6th, arguably early on that day, where the president's giving a speech, and it's a, more or less a standard political rally, if you're there not in uniform, probably no issue with that. But once that thing started to turn violent, once it started to turn into something else, where people were trespassing under the Capitol, you would have an obligation to get out of that Capitol as a service. All right, next slide. So more things that military members may do, right? Write that letter to the editor, as long as you include that disclaimer, right? That there's not DOD endorsement. You can sign a petition for legislation. Again, just making sure you're not creating that nexus to the armed services when you're engaging in these political activities. Next slide. So some specific rules again about bumper stickers, right? That sort of thing on the base. The base commander has a obligation to maintain good order, discipline on the base as a whole, right? So they kind of limit the political activity that can happen on base. Can have that bumper sticker for a political candidate. Again, when you're not in uniform, not on duty, you can also support political candidates, political parties. Next. All right, moving on to some things, again, in kind of the standard still political arena that military members may not do, right? May not do. So, may not participate in partisan political fundraising activities. Again, not that you can't contribute, but you can't actively fundraise for partisan politics, right? You can't use your official authority to influence or interfere with an election. No serving in an official capacity, right? You can't be hold a position at the Solano County Republican or Democrat club. You can't serve in that official capacity. And then again, you can't display a partisan political sign from an on-base residence. Next one. All right, so once again, just an example of what's probably not good to go, right? In uniform at a political rally for a particular candidate, implying that DOD endorsement, just don't do it, right? You're just going to cause trouble for yourself. Once again, you can attend a political rally out of uniform, off duty, but don't be that guy. Next. You guys know who this is, or no? So Forrest Gump there, giving a speech at a political rally in full uniform, right, after receiving his Medal of Honor. I don't know what he received, I forget, but not good. Also, no giving speeches at political rallies in uniform. Just another example of that. Same thing with marching in any kind of political parade. Again, just implying the uniform is going to imply DoD endorsement, and that's what's not good. Next one. Again, you can see a lot of these rules have to do with fundraising, right? You can't solicit contributions from others for a particular political candidate or cause. And these rules apply really across the board in federal buildings to civilians as well, right? The government does not want that kind of partisan political activity coming into the workplace. Next slide. Then social media, right? We see, again, talked about a little bit earlier where people kind of get in trouble. Sometimes once again, you're allowed to express your personal views, right? It should be clear that they're your personal views, not the views of the DoD, of the United States Air Force. You can follow, your favorite candidate. But again, none of this stuff should be occurring on duty in the workplace and not in uniform. Those are the key kind of takeaways. All right. So that's your kind of standard, straight ahead, normal day-to-day political activities. Before we talk about sort of dissident activities and red flags with that, are there any questions on the cover so far? All right, moving on to the next part. So you see some of the organizations basically that OSI identified earlier. They are some of the same ones. The reason some of these are identified is because they have involved military members at times as well, right? So in the case of Identity Europa, white supremacist organization, the Joint Terrorism Task Force notified OSI about the subject, who was identified on Facebook as a member of this white supremacist group. He served as the treasurer, and the Huffington Post named him in an article about service members who participate in white nationalist organizations. So, good idea to give an interview to an online media organization proclaiming your commitment to this white nationalist organization. Definitely not, right? So, at that point, obviously, the commander had an obligation to step in and do something. Again, where that line is crossed, right, between merely looking at ideas, looking at different websites, to thoughts, to actions, and what the commander can do along the way. We'll get into that as we go on. Next slide. All right, so here's what the rules really come down to, right? Military members may not actively, again, there's some key words here, right? So actively advocate, participate, or engage in furtherance of the objectives of these types of organizations, right? Organizations or ideologies that advocate supremacist, extremist, or criminal gang doctrine. We'll define those terms a little bit more as well. So the question comes up, right? Well, what's a supremacist organization? We will define those terms a little bit more. And then any organization, obviously, that advocates discriminating on the basis of those protected classes you see there: race, creed, color, sex, religion. And independent of any advocacy of a discriminatory basis, essentially, right? It's also prohibited to support an organization that is advocating the use of force or violence or other criminal activity, right? So that's where the DoD instructions essentially say you may not actively participate in these types of organizations. All right, so next slide, please. So we see some of those definitions that are key for commanders, supervisors, when they're looking at it. They see maybe a post or something that concerns them. So the question is whether the organization that the member is kind of involved with, advocating for, stating they're a member of, etc., meets these definitions, right? So supremacists, it's got to be a fundamental tenet that members of one race, color, gender, etc., are genetically superior to others. And then for those extremist organizations, they're looking at essentially groups who are advocating that use of force, threat of violence to obtain the goals of their organization, right? Particularly of concern are organizations advocating the violent overthrow of the United States government, right? definitely a problem for somebody who's serving in uniform, defending the United States government, not political power. And then finally, advocating discrimination as well, not going to be good to go. Next slide. So here's where we kind of get to see where we're sliding, we've got an airman who's maybe expressed some interest or something in these organizations, and it starts there, right, with that interest. And there's nothing in DoD regulations or Air Force instructions saying you can't, on your own time, right, out of uniform, explore these types of websites. But it is potentially a warning sign if it becomes known to others within the unit, right? So watching these impermissible videos from the organization, reading their literature, right? Visiting their website. Now, is that a problem if it's on a government computer? 100%, different situation, right? But we're talking right now what you're doing on your own time out of uniform, right? From that initial interest, it might start to translate into language, right? Talking about it with other airmen kind of becomes known within the unit. Maybe this person's involved with one of these organizations. That's when we're starting to get into that more, from green into that yellow territory where the commander has an obligation to start maybe stepping in, taking some action to see what's going on, right? See what's going on. Is this something they're really involved with? Again, are they actively participating in one of these groups, or is it just sort of mere interest, right? That's going to make a difference in terms of what the commander can do. So, one takeaway from this all as well is that mere membership, solely membership alone in one of these organizations is not prohibited, right? What that warning there says, and you probably can't read it, but it says the commanders are required, if they're aware that you're a member of one of these prohibited organizations, they shall take that into account on performance reviews and assignment decisions, right? So that is something that has to be taken into account. Not prohibited again, but commander supervisors shall take that into account. All right, next slide. So association, now we're talking about something more than mere interest, right? Paying dues to an impermissible organization, the tattoos that OSI talked about of some of the logos of these organizations, knowingly wearing colors, clothing, etc. of an impermissible organization. Again, we're sliding on that scale further and further towards that active participation that's clearly prohibited, right? Next slide. Now we're into action, right? And now clearly these types of things can be prohibited. Participating in demonstrations of these organizations, right? Impermissible causes, engaging in activities in furtherance, fundraising, right? Recruiting other people to join. All of these things are prohibited, those types of actions for military members. Next slide. Advocacy, again, this is kind of what I touched on. Fundraising, recruiting for the organization. If the organization meets those definitions of supremacists, right, extremists that we talked about earlier, you cannot, you are forbidden from any kind of active participation along these lines. Fundraising, recruiting, training, organizing, leading members, distributing propaganda, etc. All right, next slide. So this is what I talked about previously with regard to mere membership, right? Merely being a member, not prohibited, right? But it is going to raise red flags, shall be considered, may merit further investigation, right? Commander becomes aware you're a member of one of these organizations, they can get in contact with legal, with OSI, start to look into the matter to determine if there's something more than your membership. Next slide. All right, so again, you see kind of your duties, your obligations as a service member on the left. You see kind of the range of actions that a commander has. And again, what's basically going to happen is if there's some concern, the commander has some tools available to them. From command-directed investigations, right, to contacting OSI and initiating some sort of criminal investigation. So there's this wide range of tools. And depending on what the activity is, again, our goal at legal in cooperation with command is ultimately to reorient the member, right, to Air Force standards, to DoD standards, to get them back on the right track, if that's possible at that point. So that's always the goal. But just understand, depending on the severity of the conduct that you're engaging in, the penalty, you know, the potential consequences will be more severe. Next slide. All right, so we see some scenarios kind of that they pushed out in materials, right? This airman posts on Twitter, the people arrested at the Capitol building should be let go by the government or other groups may act. A little bit of an ambiguous statement, right? Could be just stating a fact of what the airman thinks, but also could kind of raise some red flags with coworkers, right? Is that airman supporting those other groups taking action if the members aren't released, right? Something where I think in this case, because it's ambiguous, the commander would have an interest in looking into it a little bit more, finding out some more information about what's going on, and again, that reorientation towards DoD and Air Force standards. It's on a government computer now, and not engaging in this kind of political activity on duty in uniform on a government computer. Clearly at that point, we've got some proper use of the government computer. All right, next scenario. All right, remember that mere membership question again, right? In this fake hate group, Extremism America, but now also wearing a t-shirt with the logo in the dorm during off-duty hours, right? So mere membership, again, not prohibited strictly, but might raise those red flags. Once you're wearing the t-shirt now in the dorms, on base, maybe crossing that line into actively promoting the organization, right? Recruiting essentially for the organization, something the commander can definitely look into at that point and take potentially those actions listed there. Next one. All right, so we've got an airman off duty manning a table for a neo-Nazi organization at a local government protest, right? Passing out literature, attempting to recruit bystanders, asking for donations. Again, now clearly into that active promotion, active participation, way past words, thoughts, you know, that sort of thing, into actively taking action to promote a clearly prohibited organization, right? Definitely going to be an issue that the commander's going to have to tackle. Next. All right, so this bottom line, just to wrap it up, right? All of us are accountable. We need to look out for each other, take care of each other, right? Making sure that everyone is treated equally with equal dignity and respect. It's incredibly important, right? To protect what we have. I was on active duty, I'm a reservist now, so coming, you know, in back from the civilian world at times, I think it's easy to forget sometimes when you're on active duty just how special this organization is, right? In the active duty context in particular, so it's been handed down to us, right, by great men and women who came before, and I think we've got a real obligation to protect it, and in doing so to look out for each other, make sure that people aren't engaging in this kind of extremist, discriminatory behavior. So with that, I'll get off my soapbox. Thanks for what you do. I'm happy to take any questions you might have for me. Did I get your question, sir, more or less, from earlier?
I think you did. Pretty much look after your bros before it gets elevated to command level, because from what I'm seeing, once it gets to the command level, there has to be action.
Yeah, and again, if it's just at the very beginning stages, I think, you know, where somebody's just kind of getting interested in this stuff, definitely, if the command's made aware, then we can kind of take some steps and say, hey, don't go down this road, where there are going to be more severe consequences. So, again, that reorientation towards the Air Force standards.
Kind of tactical level follow-up. I know for a fact there's a couple of cars on base that have the 3%er sticker on it. Don't know who they belong to, but what would be the reporting methodology for that?
So I'll get back to you on that. And it's definitely something because I hadn't heard that they were included in that grouping, right? I know that's kind of been one that's like a on the fence case, right? So I'll make a note and I can get back to these guys, but yeah, with the fact that that's in the briefing now and those are on base, it's something worth figuring out what the next steps would be for sure. So I'm gonna make a note of the exact thing.
For the masses, I will say not in our parking lot. So definitely possible there.
Any other questions? All right, thanks very much for your time.
All right, huge thank you to both our guest speakers today, Special Agent Sype and Major Rogers. So from here on out, can I have all the pre-designated facilitators come up front for me? All right, everybody else is still out there that's